For this video, we're actually going to break down the way too early predictions for the 2026 Hall of Fame and why I think certain people should be off the ballot and why I think certain people may go above the 75%. And for this, we're using baseballreference.com. But without further ado, let's shift over and break things down. The one thing I also ignored was, or left out was, there are some people on the ballot that I'm surprised that they actually stayed on, and I'm going to be explaining who I think could stay on as far as first year ballots or first year on the ballot next year, but also looking at it next year, 2026 is Manny Ramirez's last year on the Hall of Fame ballot. And with the fact that Manny has his history with steroid use, I think it is dumbfounding to me that Manny has stayed on the list this long and occupied a spot that could have been given to someone else. That Alex Rodriguez, same thing, his history of steroid use should have bumped him down a little bit further, and that he doesn't belong on the list for this long because he's taking votes away from people who actually deserve it, who actually did not cheat to get the numbers. And I know it's a one-sided approach, but the fact of the matter is, you've seen it before with people like McGuire and Sosa and Bonds, that A-Rod, the one difference with A-Rod is A-Rod was that close to suing MLB, and that he actually was one of the few to get the full year ban for usage because of the biogenesis scandal. In my opinion, he should have been preempted from being a part of the Hall of Fame induction. He shouldn't have been on the Hall of Fame ballot. But looking at it from this perspective, we saw in 2025 Billy Wagner, Ichiro, and CC Sabathia get past these 75% and are on their way to Cooperstown this July. I am surprised that many people got pushed over the top of the 75%. And now we look ahead to 2026 with Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran being the two closest and the two most likely to get over the 75% mark, alongside those that will be inducted by the Veterans Committee, which we will talk about at some point. But for me, the way I'm looking at it now, with weak ballots, with very little sure things coming around in the next couple of years, I know a lot of people look at Joe Mauer and Scott Rowland as, yeah, they may have been, potential Hall of Famers, but getting inducted when they got inducted, eh. But it's like, I would rather, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, like, if the options were Nick Markakis and Howie Kendrick and Hunter Pence and Gio Gonzalez and guys like that, I'm not saying I want to see somebody get in just for the sake of somebody getting in. I'm saying that, was Andrew Jones one of the best players in baseball for an extended period of time? If you wanted to make a list of people that were premier at their position during a window of time, yes, Andrew Jones would have been on that list. Carlos Beltran would have been on that list. Yes, using that logic, Alex Rodriguez would have been on that list. Manny Ramirez would have been on that list. But the exception is, Beltran didn't use steroids. Andrew Jones didn't use steroids. And though, yes, there are critics of Beltran because of the 2017 Astros, but it is unclear how involved Beltran was. And also, no offense, if you're not going to punish Altuve and Bregman and guys like that, then you shouldn't punish Beltran. And if you're not going to preemptively push away guys like Bonds and A-Rod and Clemens and Ramirez and guys like that from the Hall of Fame, you shouldn't preemptively, like, you got to make it make sense. So, do I think that Beltran and Andrew Jones get inducted in the Hall of Fame next year? I don't know. I do think people will go into the Hall of Fame in July 2026, but I just don't know that Beltran and Andrew Jones will be going in. Because my hunch is this: if you look at it, look at the gap between those who are on the ballots now and those who remain from the ballot the previous year. I really don't see anybody gaining tremendous amounts. And you go down to the pitching. I mean, you go down to the first year ballots. I really don't see anybody that jumps out at me as people that could stay on the ballot next year. I mean, except maybe Edwin Encarnacion. Eddie Encarnacion. I could see him staying on the ballot because honestly, I didn't realize he had 400 career home runs. Um, but Cole Hamels is a perfect example of somebody that had injuries not derailed his career. I firmly believe Cole Hamels would have been one of the people talked about as a Hall of Famer. At one point, I would have said the same thing about Matt Kemp. But somebody like Nick Markakis, who had a consistent career and was one of the stable position players for a long period of time, you can't say a stable player is a Hall of Famer. A lot of these guys that are going on the first ballot next year would be in the Hall of the mediocre or the above average or the okay but not very good. But, you know, if you look at guys like David Wright, as a Mets fan, I am dumbfounded that David stayed on the ballot. Not that I don't think David Wright is not the Hall of very good comparatively to somebody like a Scott Rowland. If you want to compare him to a Scott Rowland, if Scott Rowland is, or people say Bill Mazeroski, maybe you could make a case, but the same could be said for Chase Utley. If you want to compare him to like a Bill Mazeroski or a Scott Rowland, like if that's the line of where people are in the Hall of Fame, maybe you could make a case, but also if that's the line, Keith Hernandez should have been inducted in the Hall of Fame 20 years ago. But that's just me. Don Mattingly should have been inducted in the Hall of Fame 20 years ago. But that's just me. Those are the guys that, in my opinion, should be going in the Veterans Committee, through the Veterans Committee this year, out of anybody. They made it right last time around with Fred McGriff. They need to do the same thing this year for Don Mattingly and Keith Hernandez because both those guys belong in Cooperstown. As far as if you go shift down the ballot, if you shift down the ballot, the one person that I would say impressed me the most coming out of this year, Felix Hernandez. Injuries derailed his career and stopped Felix from having a better career than he could have. Injuries prevented Felix Hernandez from living up to the potential that he had, and there is no doubt in my mind that when I was a kid, it was Verlander, Kershaw, Felix Hernandez. Felix Hernandez was one of the top pitchers in the MLB from, I would say, 2007 to 2012, alongside the likes of Zach Greinke, alongside CC Sabathia, alongside Cliff Lee and Roy Halladay, and guys like that. But, you know, Felix Hernandez, I would say on par with somebody like Johan Santana, who had an had an incredible career, but injuries derailed his career and stopped him from becoming a Hall of Famer. I know that dissecting the Hall of Fame ballot in March, it makes more sense to do this in July or October or November or December, or hell, even in January, right before the ballot comes out. But I'm a huge fan of the Hall of Fame ballots, and if this is something I stick with and stay consistent with, then maybe you'll see it again. But with that being said, let's go down the list. Beltran, Andrew Jones, and Chase Utley. I think, in my honest opinion, Beltran and Andrew Jones were in the category of they were the best at their position or in the top five of their position. You know, if you were looking at, the best outfielders throughout a period of time, I would say for Beltran, it was 2004 to 2006 was his best career time. Andrew Jones, let's break it down and look back. I would say probably 2000 to 2005. Reasonable. I would say that's reasonable. Um, Chase Utley, honestly, I don't see Chase Utley as one of the best at his position. I see Chase Utley as comparable to Scott Rowland, who was good, but was Chase Utley the best on those teams with during the time with the Phillies in what 2005 till 2010, 2012 in that range? Honestly, no. It was Ryan Howard, it was Jimmy Rollins, it was the pitching, Cole Hamels and Cliff Lee and Roy Halladay. It was not Chase Utley. Chase Utley was not the leader of that team. Beltran took the Astros on his back in 2004 and led them to the postseason. Andrew Jones was not the best player on the Atlanta Braves. Chipper was. But was Andrew Jones one of the best outfielders in the National League during a period of time? An extended period of time? Yes. Was Chase Utley? Would I put Chase Utley in the top 10 best players in the National League during a window of time? Yeah. 2006 to 2010, I would say Chase Utley was one of the best players in the National League. From a consistency point of view. You knew what you were going to get. Do I think he's a Hall of Famer? Borderline. A-Rod, Manny, and Pettit. No. Steroids, steroids, and steroids. Felix Hernandez, do I think he's a Hall of Famer? I don't know. Did I think Joe Mauer was a first ballot Hall of Famer? No. Did I think Scott Rowland was a Hall of Famer? No. Could I see Felix getting in based on that barometer? Yeah. Yeah, I could. Because do I think there was a time when Felix Hernandez was one of the best pitchers? Was he one of the best pitchers in baseball? No. Was he on the list of the top 5? In a certain window, yes, because when Felix Hernandez was on, he was on. And if people want to make a case for Bobby Abreu, I can make a case for Felix Hernandez. Because do I think Bobby Abreu was a Hall of Famer? Honestly, I didn't realize Bobby's numbers were as good as they were. So I would say if you want to stick with the barometer, of what we had, he's on that barometer and is a borderline Hall of Famer. Yes, Jimmy Rollins. I think he's above Chase Utley. So yes, Omar Vizquel, before what happened and the past indiscretions that happened to him, honestly, if you want to take the character clause into play, no, Omar Vizquel is not a Hall of Famer. Dustin Pedroia, if injuries did not derail his career, yes, he would have been a Hall of Famer. But in this situation, no, I think he'll stick around on the ballot a couple years, and then he will be off the ballot after a while. Mark Burley, borderline. Francisco Rodriguez, I think it's a gray area because of closers, but I think he's borderline. David Wright, no, he is not a Hall of Famer. Torrey Hunter, he is not a Hall of Famer. I think much like Dustin Pedroia, David and Torrey Hunter will stick on the ballot for a couple of years and then fall off the ballot eventually. Like if you look ahead to 2027, we got a lot more first year players coming on the ballot. Buster Posey, John Lester, Ryan Zimmerman, Jake Arrieta. I mean, if he would have started his career, and it didn't take him as long to find his footing as it did, then I firmly believe Jake Arrieta could have been a Hall of Famer. I'm pretty sure Trevor Bauer has not officially retired from Major League Baseball yet, but it's just the fact that in 2027 it would have been 5 years since his last time pitching in the majors, so technically he could vest for the Hall of Fame ballot. But if you scroll through and you look around, I think at the top, Buster Posey, John Lester, Buster Posey and John Lester are definitely borderline Hall of Famers. And will probably take the spots of guys like Torrey Hunter, David Wright, Mark Burley, guys like that as far as their Hall of Fame placement is concerned. But do I think that somebody like Andrew Jones could get in 2026 or 2027? Do I think he's going to miss out on the Hall of Fame? No, I don't think he's going to miss out on the Hall of Fame. I think Andrew Jones will find his way into the Hall of Fame. I do. But in reality, I'm just a fan. What do I know? It is all my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.